Okay, I think I'll just start. So, welcome to edX. Don't just launch, thrive, customer success strategies for a sustainable future. Let me present the agenda for today. First, we're gonna have some introductions, an overview of the talk. Then we're gonna talk about the complexity of starting an edX project. Then we'll introduce our case study, which is SABAL. Then we're going to move on to strategies and recommendations based on the SABAL experience and our experience. We're going to provide some insights based on it. And finally, we're going to have an interactive question session if you have questions, or you might have questions at the end of the presentation. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Albeiro Gonzalez. I'm from Colombia. I've been working with edX for more than 6 years, and I'm proud to say that I'm a self-learner. I'm a product of this type of education. I'm self-educated, and I'm currently the head of service delivery at eduNEXT. Let me also introduce Paula Cruz. She also works at eduNEXT as a customer success specialist. She's been working with online platforms for more than 10 years. And she has a master's degree in online learning. So she's also part of our team, and we're from Colombia. In case you don't know where Colombia is, you can take a look at the map. We're located in South America, and there are many things that we share with Africa. Now that we're in Africa, it is my first time in Africa. It is actually my first time attending an edX conference. So there are many things that we share, but I just want to leave you a fun fact. And we share a fruit. In Colombia, we call this borojo, and it is quite famous because it has like aphrodisiac attributes. So, like borojo brings some extra excitement. I hope by the end of the session you will be extra excited about operating projects in edX. So let's begin. We're gonna start talking about the complexity of starting an edX project. One day, we were talking with our colleague, Paula, about implementing a standard strategy for edX projects. So our main idea was to create a standard way of operating projects, a standard way to boost success for edX projects, but we found many factors that might contribute to the success of edX. As well, these factors might also contribute to the failure of some projects of edX. We have experience handling more than 100 edX projects, hundreds actually of edX projects. We've seen some of those thrive, but unfortunately, we have seen others fail, and they get stuck in the initial phases, for example. So that's the main reasoning behind this talk, and that's the insights I want to share with you today. So there are some factors that might come into discussion depending on the type of organization or institutions you're working with or you have. The first is like business and corporations. There are some factors that you might have to consider. For example, improvement in competencies and skills, training efficiency. But let's see what if you are an educational institution like in school, university, college. You have to think about student satisfaction, retention rates, collaboration and interaction. But let's see what happens if you are an NGO. Now you have to think about the impact you're taking to the community you're targeting. You have to think about cost effectiveness, fundraising maybe. But if you are an institution working with the government, now you have some additional factors to consider, like law compliance, policy compliance. But one of the things that we saw that might be common between these three categories are like the first, organizations look for a platform that is easy to use, that is intuitive, that learners know how to use the platform. It is understandable, it is easy to use. The second factor we can consider is customization and flexibility. We need a platform, an online platform that is customizable, that is flexible, that we can adapt to the needs of the organization. And the third is scalability. We need the platform to be scalable. We need the platform to be able to support if we need to grow in terms of users and other factors. So those are the three factors we found like the Escape have in common. But now let's see in edX how it works. We have defined some stages from our experience based on our perspective of how an edX project should start and should start growing progressively. The first stage we have is foundational steps. So there are some questions that might arise when we're talking about foundational steps. The first one is infrastructure. I don't know if any of you managing your edX projects came with the question, where will I host my edX project? Will it be Azure? Will it be AWS? Will it be like I have to talk with my IT department to know what machines, what servers do I need? Then we have installation and configuration. This is like installing edX and all the configurations, dependencies that edX brings. Then we have staff training. You need to think about your team, how many people will be working in edX, how many people will be creating courses, how many people will be providing support for your project. And then we have called it in the foundational step, basic content creation. So you need at least one course with basic components. It could be some discussions, some course problems, some essential structure to be able to launch your first course. Then we have building engagement. It's like first we receive a box, an empty box. We have to fill out the box with all the factors and properties that build the e-learning offer you're trying to promote. Then we have building engagement. Once you have this box, you have to make it attractive. So people can take a look at, see what the box is offering, and they can be interested in the product you're offering. So we have resource integration. edX is powerful. It has a wide range of e-learning options, but sometimes you need to integrate external resources. So webinar tools, for example, interactive tools like H5P. Then we have marketing. You, depending on the type of organization, might have to put a little extra weight on marketing. You need to promote your courses. You need to make your courses attractive. You might need a web page, a central web page where your course catalog is to attract your learners or the audience you're targeting to. And then we have instructional design. Of course, if you're offering an e-learning initiative, you need to take care of the quality. It is not enough, like in the foundational steps, you have basic content, but then you have to think about the quality of the content you're offering. Next, we can move to sustaining operations. Once you have this running and operating, well, you need to sustain your operation. So you might have to think about establishing a support system for your educators, for your course instructors, for your learners, and for the people who is actually operating the edX project or edX instance. Then we have regular maintenance. We can talk about the infrastructure, making sure it is okay, it is responding to the initial expectations. We need to make sure that the pages are loading correctly. There are not any issue with the LMS, CMS. Then we have compatibility and updates. We need to rest assured that the components we're trying to implement into the edX instance are compatible with the current version, are compatible actually with the whole ecosystems with infrastructure. And of course, we need to make sure that it is updated, that it is receiving the latest version that the community is offering. And then we can move to the fourth stage, which is achieving growth. We call it achieving growth. We can think about extending the platform, scaling the platform, and we can just call it some sort of success. If we have reached the stage 4, we can say the project is in a certain level of success. We can see like how a real case was implemented. So I will go to the next slide. Let me introduce SABAL. SABAL is an Uruguayan organization working with the government. So it was created in 2007, and Soledad, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they established the process like in 4 phases. In 2007, the organization was created. Then from 2010, they started implementing different platforms, online platforms to teach teachers. Then from 2013, they focused on combined education. And from 2020, they are focused on interinstitutionality and a heavy use of data to improve best practices. So this is the general context from SABAL. In case you don't know where Uruguay is, you can take a look at the map at the top right. We're neighbors to Argentina, to Brazil, and we're located in South America. So some data from SABAL about the main focus they have, like delivering equipment, training teachers, and enabling internet access for the public sector of schools in Uruguay. So let's see, again, we're gonna like resume the scheme I saw before to show how edX helped SABAL to reach and to meet the objectives they have in the beginning. First, we can talk about infrastructure optimization. We are operating and running the project in Kubernetes. So one of the things we did was to establish a robust system for infrastructure, especially because one of the needs was to launch a course for 60,000 users. So we needed to make sure that the infrastructure was going to be able to respond to those challenges. Then we have dedicated servers for hosting production and databases. They have a special need to have constant access to data, to integrate this data with visualization tools like Power BI. So the main idea was to create this robust infrastructure system so that they can retrieve all the information they want without affecting the normal operation. Then we have the training part. We train SABAL with more than 20 hours of staff training, making sure the course instructors and course creators were able to understand how edX works and how they can use edX to thrive in their learning initiative. Then we can take a look at installation and configuration. So there are some configurations we perform for this project. First, we have the eduNEXT control center. This is an integration. This is a product from eduNEXT. Basically is a console where they manage all the aspects about their organization. Things like the look and feel, things like integrations, things like reporting. There's a central console that complements the CMS and the LMS. Then we have EX Core APIs. This is another product of eduNEXT, which is there are some APIs to create, update, and manipulate records such as learners, grades, and users. Then we have the CLI, a command line interface tool, to perform these operations in a massive way with an intuitive interface that the technical team from SABAL uses. And then we have a configuration, the single sign-on with the CAS protocol, plus some APIs, additional APIs for course creation and course management. This is like the first stage, foundational steps, the way we applied it to SABAL. We can move now to building engagement. As you remember, we just talked about resource integration. So we integrated interactive components such as Articulate, H5P, SCAR modules into the OpenNX environment. And if we talk about marketing and instructional design, SABAL again was created in 2007, so they had been establishing and strengthening a team for promoting courses and also to make sure that they're delivering high quality education. So they already had this team. We didn't have much intervention there besides implementing the OpenNX platform and enable them to use it. But I want to emphasize on this because, as we saw before, this might get an importance when operating courses to make sure you're promoting your courses correctly and you're delivering high quality education. So probably you need a team for both, or maybe the same team works on that. Then we're gonna see sustaining operations applied to SABAL. So the first item I want to mention is a custom support. As we saw before, it is necessary to implement a support system, either for educators, for your whole team, for the young learners. So we provide a custom support for SABAL. Basically, essentially, it's a support system in which we receive requests for configuration, for example. We receive questions, inquiries, and this is software. Everything does not go well all the time. So we need to be prepared. We need to be ready to take care of those issues. So we also receive some incidents that might happen during the operation. And then we have regular maintenance, and I can divide this into two. Like, first, proactive monitoring, making sure that the infrastructure is responding correctly to the challenges they have. The second is, as I mentioned before, to be ready in case something goes wrong. So we have an incident response protocol. It could be something like the page is not loading correctly, but it could be something like X or Y server just shut down and we need to fix it right away. Then we have compatibility and updates. There are some times where we need to integrate an external resource, but we need to make sure that it's actually compatible with the OpenNX environment we're working on. So that's part of the compatibility work we do. And then we have updates. Of course, our responsibility is to keep the version in the latest OpenEDX release version. So, you know, the community is releasing a new version every 6-7 months. So we need to make sure that we're updating the project correctly. Then we have another item, which is dedicated support. And I can also divide this into two. The first one is like the research and development. Depending on the type of initiative, you might have different needs, different expectations. You might have the necessity to integrate different types of resources. So we need to go spend some time and checking if it's feasible. And also we recommend any type of integration, because sometimes you might just be losing time and money on resources that you might not need in reality for your OpenEDX project. And the other part is related to what I just mentioned, which is like the success part. I mentioned this success word like, I don't know how many times, but I want to emphasize on this. So we also provide some guidance on how we consider the project can be successful. And of course, this is an agreement between the support team, in our case, and the organization. Our main idea is, let's make this OpenEDX project successful. I can show you some data, for example, the number of courses they're currently operating, their number of generated certificates, number of course interactions, interactive course components, how many active users they're currently operating. This is an important figure. I'll invite you to take a look because I will use it in a couple of minutes. And the number of registered users for this project. Then we can move on to achieving growth. I don't know if you agree, but after all this work, setting infrastructure, setting up a team, sustaining the operation, we can call it success, right? Like the project was able to meet the initial objectives. So one of the things we did to extend and making sure the operation was successful was again a couple of configurations that I already mentioned, but I have some others like automatic email sending. Basically, in SABAL's case, was the implementation of MailChimp and Mandrill for transactional emails. MailChimp as the mail marketing email platform. Then we have auto enrollment. This is a special configuration with some APIs that, based on the grading policy, if a user reaches certain grade, there's a trigger and they're going to be enrolled in a list of courses predefined by the project. And we also can mention that the organization is working hardly of some exoneration with telecommunication companies to exonerate the use of data of some users that are actually into the OpenEdX platform. So we enabled educator servers to identify that traffic and to make the work easier, to know who are using or what users are using the platform. Some things that I mentioned already: Kubernetes cluster related to the infrastructure, the cluster that is able to respond adequately depending on the traffic or the number of users they're operating, and again the service for hosting the databases, something that I already mentioned. Now I want to show you which were the main challenges for SABAL when they started. So let us mention this in the keynote session this morning. So I want to do a little recap. The first big challenge was to launch a course for 60,000 users. And you can tell me if they did it or not. I just mentioned a figure before: 53,000 users, active 1,000 users, currently using the platform. So we are quite close to the initial goal. And then we have efficiency in online training. All the things and all the aspects I mentioned before contributed to be efficient while offering the e-learning education SABAL offers. And then we have monitoring of course progress and centralized data. I will mention again the databases, the robust system they use to retrieve data, because this was one of the challenges they had in the beginning, to be able to retrieve data without affecting other aspects of the operation. And then we have centralized data. And I can mention the integrations they're having with Power BI using the database system. But also, this is recent news, we just installed Aspects. You know, Aspects is the official analytics platform. So we just installed it last week. So our expectation is that Aspects will contribute to this third challenge of having centralized data, and especially since SABAL is heavily focused on good use of data since 2020, part of their strategy. So those were the three main challenges they had for this initiative. And I will say that is success. That is their version of success. And I want to make a comparison because sometimes, and I will connect to the next section actually, which is some recommendations we have based on this experience, based on SABAL experience. So the first thing we can recommend is to understand the initiative. And you might think that when someone is looking for OpenEdX, an organization or university, they have clear what they want to do. And the reality is sometimes they don't. So we have to provide some help. And this is because an organization might come and tell you, I need a course for 1 million users. And you say, okay, I can help you to reach 1 million users, but let's wait, let's think for a bit if you can reach 1 million users, or if you need the resources to operate 1 million users. So you might be wasting time and money setting up resources for a traffic that you might not need. So we have to understand what the initiative is, what the initiative wants, key stakeholders, like handling a project, key stakeholders, understanding the mission of the initiative, and I will connect to the second, which is establishing objectives, is like get grounded. But let's get real. How many users you will really operate? So instead of wasting resources like infrastructure, money, time, setting up like a whole ecosystem for thousands and thousands of users, if your use case is just, let's say you're a corporation, you only need to train 2,000 users, why you're setting up a system for 60,000 users, for 100,000 users? You just need a system that is able to operate without any issues, 2,000 users. So establishing real objectives in agreement with the organization, of course, will help us define the next step, which will connect to laying the foundations. I'm going to connect this to the foundational steps we saw before. So once we have a clear expectation of what the organization needs, once we have a clear reality what the organization will be operating, once we have clear objectives and hopefully a defined schedule of how the project will go, we have to connect directly to foundational steps we saw before. We need to think about infrastructure. How many resources you will need to operate your instance. We need to think about infrastructure first, of course. You need to think about your team, how many people you will need to operate your courses. Again, depending on the type of operation you have. Because the same person in a small organization normally is the same manager, the ones who create the courses, and then the ones who operate the courses. But if we're talking about a bigger organization, we have to think about team for creating courses, team for operating courses, your team for support, your team for marketing, and we need to establish the team that is working on the edX instance. Then as we saw in the foundational steps, besides these things, we need to think about the training and support. And this is quite important. I can divide it into two. Of course, you need to keep your team trained, updated, and close to the community is our recommendation. The community is a living process, always changing, releasing new features. So it is quite easy, I would say, to keep behind it. So you need to be really close to the community, and that includes, hopefully, if you can be part actively of the community, contribute to the community, because one of the ideas is to make edX better, successful together. And the other part is, if you have established community within your learners, that's another community that you have and must keep updated. And also, if we talk about your team, again, since this technology changes quite quick, we need to make sure that your team is able to implement all the features, all the characteristics that the edX technology is offering. And then we have monitoring and evaluation. I can divide this into two. Monitoring and evaluation, again, from the technical part, is making sure that the infrastructure is responding correctly, that the operation is being efficient and is providing quality performance. But we can also talk about success, again. Like, are we meeting the initial goals we set up? Because we might have just started a project, and after 2 years, we're just frustrated, we don't know what to do, we're spending time, money, we have probably hired a big team, so we need to make sure that the initial goals are being met, that we're meeting the initial expectations. So we recommend doing like a regular analysis of the initiative to see if we're accomplishing with those goals. And this is a healthy practice, actually, because it is easy to get lost in the operation. Once you're operating, for example, in SABAL's case, 60,000 users, so you're focused only on operating 60,000 users, and there is no space to reflect a little to see if the mission is being accomplished. So we can take a look at that and see what was the main goal for this project. So we have to think about that as well. So I can divide those into two. So one of the practices we have implemented is to create like a project's resume, like all the information for the project, and making sure that we completely understand what the project wants, and following these recommendations based on our experience, we can say that those are worked for us. As I mentioned before, we probably operated hundreds of instances until today. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we have seen some of those thrive, which is amazing because you're part of the community. So open edX is useful, it's great, so you made it. But we have seen some of those fail. Some of those get stuck in the initial phases, for example, when thinking about how many resources do I need to operate this, how much money do I need to operate this. So that is basically my recommendation, our recommendation to operate an open edX project. And now I would like to invite you to make any questions you might have. If there is no any question, for example, have you get stuck in the initial phase, like setting up the infrastructure, or setting up like the first course? Who has had that problem, for example? You can raise your hand if you want. For example, can you tell us your experience? Yeah, sure. Let me.
I don't know if I need to talk loudly because I'll turn this way. Our company is, I work for Toastmasters International, and our company is launching in October, we hope. And we have had many challenges building our courses and figuring out what we need. It's kind of like all of your steps 1 through 5 even are on top of each other. And so I do have a question eventually, but we have felt stuck at certain moments and have had that resource conversation and have had some challenges creating even just courses that talk to each other. And we do eventually work it out, right? We have gotten to the point where we feel like we're going to get there. But it's been a couple of years of development work and creation and dropping requirements and creating new requirements. So when you're talking about having a very clear goal, that just speaks to my little work heart. So, and along that line, I guess my question is about Toastmasters is an international organization. We have 200,000 members across, I think, 150 different countries. And so one of our biggest challenges at the current moment is translating our content and how we use courses that are the same content but in different libraries. And I think I've come to the conclusion in this convention that translations is kind of a big question mark in a lot of ways. There are different ways that you can do things, different applications that you can have. So my question for you really is, when looking at the same content that has to be used in different languages, how do you recommend we get past these hurdles of what do we do, right? We are currently stuck on translating our content and getting things figured out. And it is something that I think maybe there are lots of solutions for. So do you have experience with that? And if so, please help, basically.
Well, one of the great things about edX is the languages, the localization. So at least you have, and you can rest assured that all the content you're preparing is going to be correctly translated and used in the edX platform. Of course, we cannot guarantee that the content itself is going to be translated, but we can think of different ways. I mean, everyone is talking now about AI and is trying to implement AI. So for example, we can check if an AI integration might work in that case. But again, we have to examine and see what the correct scope and the correct expectation is on that. So we will have to do some analysis, I would say, to provide a correct answer and a complete answer.
I was just going to add a little bit to that, actually, because I know eduNEXT, in a separate project for Unidigital team in Spain, worked on, sorry, a frog in my throat, worked on translating content in different languages for, I think specifically like Catalan, Valenciano, and Castilian Spanish for courses that are taught at UP Valencia, and they used the teams concept. So teams are assigned automatically by languages, and then people are directed to the courses based on what team they're in, and the content, if it's available in a translated version, is served to the student appropriately based on their team. So that's one option that's been built into the platform in the last, call it 6 months. But this is a case where I think like being active in the community is really critical. Getting into Slack and talking to folks about what they're doing is really critical, because another organization I'll mention is the Wikimedia Foundation, who use Open edX for training moderators for Wikipedia. And I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but they have hundreds of languages that they support their trainings. And so there are organizations that are struggling with and solving the same problem that you have.
Thank you so much for that compliment. So, is there any additional questions, any additional thoughts you might want to share?
I have a very quick one, actually. Would you mind going back to the slide where you had all the stages grouped together?
Sure.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
In your experience, or from what you know about this kind of roadmap, if you like, which is the key sort of sticking point that many sort of startup companies in the tech space have?
I would say
or there's probably more than one, but I mean the major ones.
That's the thing. I would say that depends of the type of organization. Some of those get stuck in the infrastructure part, like they have no idea, because you might be just an educator or a course instructor, so you just want to create your courses and publish your courses. So you don't know anything about the technical stuff. You shouldn't, actually. But some of organizations get stuck in that part, like they are content creators, they just focus on creating and enabling content, so they have issues with the technical part. But some others are quite good at technical stuff. They can set up everything, any type of environment you want, but they lack knowledge or maybe a team that is able to create good content. There are some others that can set up the infrastructure or the system, that can launch a basic course, but then they have problems with the engagement part. Like, okay, now I have everything ready, but the quality is not that great, so they start to have problems with that. So to answer your question, I would say this is not a cycle. This is more like an iteration, on this part of the process. So some organizations might have issues in any of the stages. So, and just to give you a complete answer, based on our experience of the OpenEdX instance we have operated, I would say that the technical part is probably the hardest for them. Like, they don't know what to do. They actually don't know where to host the instance, where to start actually. So they just came for looking for help to at least start with one course, and that implies with the technical part. So I would say that's the main reason, based on our experience, why some projects might have some problems.
And just to follow up on that, do most of the companies, are they quite competent at community building? Because I think it's almost like there's three sections of being successful in this kind of business, and one of them is creating content, one of them is the technical, like actually being able to push it out, but the third is actually creating that community, which generates the engagement ultimately and keeps it sustainable. Is that sort of more or less right?
Is that, sorry?
I say, is that would sound accurate. So I was just wondering if a lot of the companies that come through are successful community builders?
Not necessarily. In terms of the OpenEdX community, we hope like every organization that comes to our services contributes to the OpenEdX. So that doesn't happen always. We try to connect the things we do like to contribute directly to the community, but there are some custom projects that not necessarily go and contribute to the open source or to upload something upstream. That doesn't happen quite often. But I want to connect just to finish and to respond to your question with a final slide. Just a second, I will get there. And my invitation is this. This is fine-tuned by ChatGPT, I will not lie. But the main idea behind is our invitation is to operate, in case you're a provider or an operator, to operate your OpenEdX projects thinking about the community, thinking about contributing to the community to make the community successful, because we are providing good assistance and good support to make our project successful. So at the end of the day, of course, we want to impact lives and education. So this is our invitation to respond to your question. That doesn't happen always. So we're trying to promote the collaboration and contribution to the community. That is one of our main focus, and actually in the company is probably the main focus, like to be really close to the community, contribute to the community, and making sure that every step we take, either we're taking it with the community or we're contributing to improve the community in some way. So that's actually my final invitation, and I hope this is the outcome from this talk. And that's it. Have a good afternoon.